You did not arrive at these words by coincidence. Some quiet compass within your soul has guided you here at precisely this hour. When the screen goes dark again, you will understand why. For you have already tasted the mystery we are about to name. Think of those nights when life felt as fragile as a blown glass sphere, when one more disappointment would have been enough to shatter everything you once called self. And yet, without any warning, a subtle warmth, a perfect timing, a stranger's gentle gesture slipped in between you and the edge. It was not mere fortune, nor was it a random sequence of events. It was an unseen current moving with the exactitude of constellations, holding you upright, even as your conscious mind rehearsed defeat. Such protection never announces itself with thunder. It does not arrive with noise or spectacle. It enters your life in synchrony, like a soft hand, steadied beneath fine porcelain invisible, until the moment you look back and trace the pattern. Then the realization dawns. You have never walked alone. In the pages that follow, we will explore 5 unmistakable signs that this higher power, call it grace guardian energy, or the silent self that Jung believed connects us to the eternal, has been keeping vigil over your most tenuous hours, not by controlling the path, but by walking with you through every uncertain step, accompanying you with an intimate, unwavering presence. Sign 1. You've stood at the edge and something pulled you back. There have been moments, perhaps more than you're willing to admit, when your hand hovered above a choice that could have rewritten your whole life, and in the very last breath something wordless intervened. It wasn't logic. It wasn't fear. It was a force rising from your chest like a tide saying no. Wait, not this. You didn't know why. Only that something deep inside you refused to move forward. You were about to make the call, sign the contract, send the message, walk through that doorway, and then everything went still. Later on, time revealed what your conscious mind couldn't yet grasp, that the glitter you saw wasn't gold, that the momentum was only illusion in motion. It wasn't strategy that protected you. It was guidance, quiet, precise, intuitive. Looking back now, you begin to see how these subtle interventions were scattered across your life, like invisible threads woven into the mess, redirecting your path, not flawlessly, but with meaning. There was a time you chose a path you couldn't explain. You were drawn to a person or a place without knowing why, and somehow that step led exactly where your soul had long been reaching. It wasn't predicted, it wasn't planned, but it arrived in perfect timing, because the presence that walks beside you doesn't deal in certainty. It moves in resonance. It doesn't ask for explanation. It asks only for trust. The more you begin to notice these unseen nudges, the more clearly they begin to appear like light building behind a curtain. When you stop denying where they come from, it's as if recognition itself opens a doorway, a quiet permission for that higher frequency to move with even more clarity. You no longer need to explain every decision with reason. You stop demanding immediate answers, because time and again, the delay has revealed itself as direction. What you thought was a sidetrack was actually safety. What felt like silence was a deeper kind of order. True protection doesn't block out sorrow. It doesn't remove the lessons, but it softens the impact. It holds you through what might have broken you. It doesn't erase the pain, but it guards your wholeness while you walk through it. And even if no one else notices, you do, because you felt it. More than once, that quiet pivot, the whisper just before collapse, the unlikely coincidence that suddenly pulled everything into meaning. And you begin to realize you don't have to be falling apart for it to come near. Sometimes it arrives in the middle of a completely ordinary day, when doubt seeps in, and a lyric, a page, a stranger's glance echoes exactly what your worn heart still holds, but can't voice. These aren't random events. They're how the soul speaks, subtle affirmations that murmur, "I haven't left." You no longer need to know how the whole thing works. You only need to know that it does. You've begun to trust the invisible more than anything you can calculate or predict. You sense perhaps more deeply now that you were never meant to carry the entire weight on your own. Something, whatever name you give it, has been moving alongside you, even in the most silent moments, and that trust didn't come from doctrine. It came from living, from remembering just how many times things could have fallen apart completely, but didn't. How, in your most vulnerable hours, life found a way to hold you without asking permission. That wasn't random, and it wasn't luck. It was a kind of invisible guardianship, not the type that prevents every pain, but the kind that makes sure pain doesn't undo you. Not the kind that dictates your path, but the one that stays just close enough to guide. Not loud, but always near. And even in the moments when you felt furthest from everything, that quiet presence was already clearing the next step for you. Not so you wouldn't fall, but so that if you did, you'd still be whole. Not to remove the ache, but to remain beside you through every step of it. That's what real protection is. Not a rescue, but a sacred presence that walks with you as you unfold into yourself. Sign 2. When everything falls apart, and a stillness you did not summon holds you together. There comes a season in nearly every life when the outer scaffolding collapses with the suddenness of a summer storm. The job you were counting on slips away without warning. A doctor delivers news that shakes your bones. A relationship unravels in a single, irreversible conversation. You find yourself standing in the debris of all your plans and expectations. Your breath shortens, your eyes burn, and you're convinced this time you won't survive the night. But then, out of nowhere and without any effort on your part, a quiet stillness descends. It doesn't take the crisis away. It doesn't numb the ache. Instead, it anchors you, like the steady hand of a parent, pressed gently on a child's back. It helps you breathe again, even when you're on the verge of breaking. You don't think your way into it. You feel it, a subtle presence humming behind the chest, whispering, "Breathe. This moment is not your ending. It is a crossing." Years ago, my friend Michael, an accountant who lived for stability and routine, walked into his office to find a termination notice on his desk. That same evening, he came home to find divorce papers waiting in the mailbox. 2 separate endings, both in one day. Later, he told me he sat in his car at dusk, hands shaking on the steering wheel, certain that the weight of shame and fear would collapse him. Then a strange warmth bloomed in his chest. No words, no effort, just a quiet arrival of peace he couldn't explain. It felt like something unseen had fastened him into a place of calm inside the storm. He wept not from despair, but from the sheer relief of being held by something he didn't summon. 1 week later, a former client unexpectedly offered him freelance work. A therapist he'd never met had a sudden opening on the very night his loneliness reached its peak. Michael still believes the calm came first. The answers followed. Carl Jung might call that calm a visitation from the self, the deeper center of the psyche, that carries the imprint of something beyond our personal story. When the ego collapses, the self steps forward not to eliminate the lesson, but to keep the lesson from destroying the learner. Your thoughts may still be chaotic. Your hands may still tremble. But beneath the turmoil, a quiet pool of still water begins to form, mirroring the sky within you that you thought was lost. This stillness isn't something you can manufacture. It isn't created by will or mantras. It's granted. It arrives from a realm deeper than language, older than your questions. It comes when your body has no strength left to pretend, when the illusion of control has been broken open. You've felt this moment. Maybe it was 200 a.m., the kitchen table covered in unpaid bills, your heart pounding, your palms damp, and then a single breath moves through you deeper than the rest, and something shifts. Nothing changes on the outside, but somehow you are no longer drowning. Or maybe it happened by the bedside of someone you loved in their final hours. and for one brief moment, grief and gratitude collided into something wordless and holy. That hush wasn't indifference. It was presence, a sacred arrival that kept you from being swallowed whole by sorrow. If you look closely, you'll notice this calm has a kind of structure. It doesn't block your view of the abyss. It lets you see clearly without being pulled into it. Later, when the storm has passed, you start to recognize a pattern. Every time despair came close, a softness appeared. It kept you from falling too far. It bought you just enough space for the future to still find you. That's why you trust it now. You've learned the difference between a calm you force into existence and a calm that is given. The first is fragile, requiring effort to maintain. The second vibrates from another dimension. In time, you even begin to feel it before the chaos arrives. You wake on an ordinary morning with an inexplicable peace, as if someone laid clean linen across your spirit. Only later do you understand the confrontation. The illness, the sudden change, was already on its way. It's as though the universe stretches your inner runway before the turbulence begins. This calm is not just emotional, not merely physical. It's embedded in your cells. It moves through your pulse. You felt it in breakdowns, in anger. In that moment, you finally dropped to the floor and whispered, "I don't know how to go on." And in that breaking, something vast and without language rose up and held the pieces of you in place. Jung might describe this as the protective function of the unconscious, a wiser layer emerging when your conscious mind can no longer manage the weight. It makes no demands, sets no deadlines. It simply surrounds you until you can begin again. And slowly you realize this stillness isn't a rare visitor. It's been living in you all along. You don't have to climb to reach it. You only need to yield. One long exhale, a pause in your frantic seeking. And there it is, like a friend who arrived early and has been waiting patiently for you to notice. Don't mistake this for apathy. It is sacred cooperation. When you stop resisting the storm, you become still enough to feel the compass that's already inside you. The problems might remain unsolved, but panic loosens its grip. In that stillness, clarity begins to emerge. Decisions you couldn't reach suddenly appear without struggle. Your external world hasn't shifted, but your inner frequency has. You learn to meet the calm halfway. 10 quiet breaths in a checkout line. A hand over your heart before a hard conversation. And something deeper than courage rises. You remember the stillness that held you on the hospital floor is just as present in a traffic jam, an email inbox, or a lonely Sunday night. Each time you return to it, the path gets clearer. The bridge grows stronger, until eventually you don't need crisis to find it again. You can rest in it at will. This is protection, not an escape, but a sanctuary that remains even after every wall falls. It doesn't stop life from breaking. It keeps life from breaking you. It walks behind you quietly, never pushing, always available. Others may not notice the shift, but you do. That sudden internal order while everything outside still looks the same. You couldn't force this. It came when striving gave way. All it ever asked was for your surrender, a small, silent willingness to be held by something you can't name. Sign 3. The world begins to speak in private codes meant only for you. Perhaps you've noticed it already on a completely ordinary Thursday morning. The same line from a poem drifts through 2 separate radios in unrelated places. A phrase you whispered in prayer the night before suddenly appears on a stranger's shirt, and again in a headline as you scroll your feed. Then, just as doubt begins to ripple through your chest, you glance at the clock and see 1:11 glowing back at you. And for reasons you cannot explain, those simple numbers feel like a reassurance, a touch on the shoulder from something unseen. To anyone else, these moments would pass unnoticed, mere coincidence. But to you, they land like private messages sealed with invisible hands. Carl Jung called this kind of event Synchronicity, meaningful connections between your inner world and outer reality that defy rational cause. But when it happens to you, it's not theory. It's a feeling, like a hush through the trees, as if everything around you suddenly bends just slightly in your direction, trying to get your attention. A client of mine, Evelyn, age 52, was still aching from a recent downsizing that left her untethered and full of questions. One night, she found herself on the floor of her attic, surrounded by dust and old boxes, rummaging for any sign of what to do next. Her eyes blurred with tears as she dug through fading papers and childhood relics. Then, out of nowhere, a photograph slipped free. It was her 9-year-old self holding a paintbrush, fingers speckled in cerulean blue. She hadn't painted in over 30 years. She had long ago traded art for accounting. Later that same night, while scrolling absently through social media, an ad appeared for an artist-in-residence program. It was located in the same seaside town her late mother used to dream of visiting. She dismissed it, just a coincidence, probably an algorithm. But the next morning, as she stepped outside, she nearly tripped over a discarded canvas leaning against her building's dumpster. It was blank, except for a single deliberate streak of cerulean blue. She said something inside her belly dropped and lifted at the same time. Within a month, Evelyn had moved into a converted barn by the sea, was mixing color again, and sold a painting to the very first person who walked in. "I'm terrified," she told me, "but I'm reverent, and I finally feel awake." There was no logical reason for how the pieces came together, no linear plan, but the timing was too precise, too symphonic to be dismissed as random. When your inner world is ripe, the outer world begins to answer. You'll start to hear lyrics that mirror your exact questions. Phrases repeat. Numbers follow you. A feather lands on your windshield after you whisper a desperate plea into the air. You prepare to sign a contract you secretly dread, and an old friend you haven't heard from in 20 years calls at that exact moment. These aren't signs of superstition. They are polished mirrors held up by something beyond you, inviting you to notice the dialogue always unfolding between your soul and the world around you. You don't summon these signs with effort. They arrive on their own, like stars, only appearing when the sky goes dark enough. At first, you may want dramatic proof, lightning, clarity carved into clouds. But in time, you learn that the smallest signs carry the deepest weight. A single dandelion blooming through concrete, a sentence overheard in a cafe that unravels a week of mental fog, a dog pausing mid-walk, looking straight into your eyes, tail wagging as if it recognizes a light you didn't know you still carried. Your rational mind may argue, but your body knows. Your skin tingles, your breath catches, your heart softens, and in that moment, something inside you bows because it has been seen by something larger than itself. Not every message reveals its meaning right away. Some settle quietly in your subconscious like seeds, buried in winter waiting for the right season. You stop rushing to decode them. Jung advised patience. He knew the psyche unfolds only when the conscious ego is ready to hold what the unconscious reveals. So, you write down the dream of the white owl even though you don't understand it. And 6 months later, when unexpected test results shift your life, that same dream returns soft wings, silent night, a reminder that change is often preceded by mystery. With time, you develop a second language, not one that the intellect can conjugate, but one the heart fluently speaks. You stop asking the world to shout. A whisper is enough. A license plate with your grandmother's initials eases your anxiety as you drive to an appointment. A breeze flips open a book you left unfinished, and the page lands on the one sentence you most needed to read. You no longer dismiss these moments. You've felt the jolt of recognition too many times. That sensation as if something inside you clicks into place like a compass snapping back to north. There will still be periods of silence, long stretches where no sign comes. In the past, that silence would have scared you. You would have feared the presence had left. But now, you know the silence is a message in itself. You are walking in alignment. There is no need for signs when you are already on the path. True protection doesn't flood you with constant guidance. It trusts you to walk forward even in quiet. This is not absence. This is maturity. Eventually, your entire life becomes an altar. No incense needed, no chanting, just awareness, sincere perception. And when nothing shows up for weeks, no signs, no codes, you close your eyes, place a hand on your chest, and remember Evelyn, the attic, the photo, the blue streak, the canvas by the dumpster, the barn by the sea. You remember the feather, the owl, the dog's gaze. You remember that the same force that orchestrated those encounters has not disappeared. It hasn't gone silent. It's simply composing the next note in the unfolding of your life. And just by remembering, your nervous system softens. Your chest expands. Your body prepares to receive. This is the third sign of true protection. The world itself begins to shapeshift to echo your internal state, not to command your choices, but to confirm your quiet knowing. Each sign is a gesture of tenderness from the unseen, a reminder that you are never separate, that everything seen and unseen are woven into one single living tapestry, and you open listening alive are the loom where they meet. Sign 4. The awakening of an inner compass that guides you away from false paths. Sign 4 arrives without a trumpet, without warning, without announcement. And yet, once it reaches you, it rearranges everything you believed you knew about clarity and certainty. It is the quiet emergence of an inner compass so finely calibrated that it detects the faint tremor of a misaligned choice long before the mind can make its list of pros and cons. You may have felt it, a subtle tightening in the stomach, as you walk into an office glowing with opportunity, an office everyone else praises as your breakthrough moment. Or perhaps it came as a hush across your shoulders, just as an old friend invites you into a partnership that looks perfect on the surface. That hush, that tension is not anxiety and not moodiness. It is the deeper radar of your being, tuning into something the intellect hasn't yet translated. It says, not this, not here, not now. Consider Daniel, a 50-year-old architect who had spent over 30 years designing monuments for others while never tending to the interior blueprint of his own life. One afternoon, he toured a luxury development slated to make him a partner at his firm. The paperwork was ready. The financials gleamed as the investors described glass facades and rooftop gardens. A dull ache began forming behind Daniel's ribs, as if his chest was constricting around a truth he couldn't name. He quietly excused himself, stood alone in the hallway still under construction, and heard something unexpected, a whisper from memory. He smelled pine. He saw the dust-lit interior of his grandfather's woodworking shed. He remembered the joy of shaping something meaningful with his own hands. Without a clear reason why, he turned down the offer. He accepted the disappointment of his colleagues, and 3 months later, he received an invitation to restore a chapel in the mountains. The project married craftsmanship with silence and reawakened his long-buried love for living wood. That same instinct which said no to prestige also said yes to purpose. It showed him protection that prioritizes inner integrity over outer applause. This guidance isn't reactive emotion. It's resonance. It doesn't arise from mental strategy. It comes from a deeper layer Jung might call the self, the archetype, that contains our wholeness before the ego can articulate it. It doesn't argue. It doesn't scream. It feels like stillness in the bones, a pressure behind the eyes, a warmth in the limbs, or a strange weightlessness that points toward something waiting. You may not always recognize the source, but through experience, often painful ones, you've learned that to ignore it is to invite misalignment, and to listen is to move toward coherence. The mind demands logical proof. but the body delivers truth through sensation. Perhaps there were times you overrode the subtle signal. You stayed in the relationship because the holidays were near, and leaving seemed too disruptive. You signed the lease because everyone you knew was flocking to that neighborhood, and you feared being left behind. There was no obvious fallout, but something wore you down. You felt a fatigue that lingered in your muscles, a restlessness that no amount of sleep or vacation could fix. The cost wasn't disaster, it was erosion. These misalignments became teachers. They taught you that peace is not indulgent, it is clarity, and that intuition is not merely defense, it is also navigation. It doesn't just protect you from harm, it guides you toward what enlivens. You remember the afternoon you wandered down a street you'd never taken, entered a small bookstore for no reason, and found yourself in a conversation that sent a thrill down your spine. That person became a mentor, a door opener who arrived without planning. Such meetings are not randomness, they are convergence, a response from a greater field to the authenticity of your being. When your signal is true, life answers in kind, but this compass can be inconvenient. It may urge you to decline a generous invitation, to exit a room just when the music gets loudest. Friends may ask why you left, why you hesitated, and you won't always have an explanation that makes sense outside your skin. But you've stopped needing to explain what your nervous system already knows. The calm in your body is enough. You begin to stand in quiet conviction while others keep dancing. And in those moments, you discover that the deepest loyalty is the one you offer to your own alignment. Over time, this voice becomes less dramatic but more precise. It may surface as a fatigue in rooms that once thrilled you, a subtle sign you've grown beyond them. Or it might come as a quiet urgency and enthusiasm that feels like a soft push toward something uncertain, but right. The more you honor it, the clearer it becomes. What once took weeks of agonizing debate now arrives in a single breath. Jung wrote that real guidance does not coerce. It collaborates. It allows you to stumble when what you learn from falling is more important than staying upright. Even when you ignore it and walk into pain, it does not abandon you. It waits with patience, lantern in hand, ready to guide you home once you've gathered the wisdom buried in the brambles. That's what real protection looks like. It doesn't remove every bruise, but it keeps you from the kind of fracture that would sever you from yourself. Now you feel the compass turn even before you open the next door. A space either welcomes your breath or closes in around it. A person either lightens your skin or leaves behind a faint residue. You no longer blame those who tire you. You simply walk another way, and in doing so, you honor their story and yours. Each time you choose this inner truth, the protective force grows louder, more visible, as if grateful to be trusted. What once felt like hypersensitivity now becomes refined perception, and your field becomes clearer, which is why it can no longer accommodate what no longer resonates. This is not resistance. It is loyalty to the rhythm of your own becoming. Every time you listen to that yes or to that quiet no, a voice within says, "Thank you for not betraying us this time." And in that whisper is the oldest kind of knowing. Protection isn't a force outside you pulling levers from a distance. It is a current living inside you, steering you gently toward what mirrors your truth and away from what would dim it. So, when the tightening comes before your thoughts have caught up, pause, listen, feel. There is a logic in what you can't yet name. It may walk you through uncertainty, but it will never leave you lost. The road it points to may be difficult, but it will always be sincere. And sincerity is the only place your soul has ever wanted to rest. Sign 5. The heart that refuses to seal. Picture Elena, a pediatric nurse in her late 40s, who had held more than one fragile life in her arms, only to watch it slip away. After the unexpected loss of her younger brother, those around her quietly prepared for the inevitable hardening. that often follows grief of that magnitude. But months later, they found her still on the night shift, still singing gently to a newborn child, with tears in her lashes and a warmth in her voice large enough to hold an entire ward. She could have shut down. She could have closed her chest like so many do, and no one would have blamed her. But something quieter, something older and more mysterious kept her heart open. In Jungian psychology, that something might be called the protecting self, a deeper internal presence that stays connected to the greater field of life and ensures the soul stays supple even in a world that constantly tries to turn it to stone. That you, like Elenena, can still feel sorrow without allowing it to calcify into bitterness is not naivete. It is evidence of a more delicate and powerful kind of guardianship. It's as though an invisible hand has been cupped gently around your inner flame, through every storm, allowing it to flicker, but never go out. The psyche that has truly been protected is not the one that never bleeds. It's the one whose scars never closed over the wellspring of compassion. Jung taught that wholeness comes not from denying suffering, but from learning to hold it. You remember the betrayals that could have made you numb, the losses that could have sealed your heart like frozen winter soil. But something stepped in. Maybe it was a memory, the way someone once showed you kindness in a moment when you didn't expect it, or a stranger's smile that caught you off guard while you were still quietly breaking inside, or simply the hush of dawn, light falling across your kitchen table after a sleepless night. And in that moment, you remembered that tenderness is your native ground. The fact that you still choose to keep your heart ajar, even after what it has endured, is a spiritual milestone. It reveals that pain passed through you, but did not rewrite your essence. You didn't turn your wounds into weapons. You allowed them to stretch your vision wider. This ability to remain soft is not a personal achievement. It is the signature of something greater sustaining you from within. Each time you choose to meet the world with an undefended gaze, you are participating in a sacred contract between your unfolding soul and the invisible force that refuses to let your light be extinguished. You will continue to risk love, and in return, life will continue to surround you with a safety net you may never see, woven from meaning, synchronicity, and the quiet resilience that whispers, your light was never meant to vanish in darkness. It was forged for something far deeper. You weren't just protected. You were changed quietly, steadily, by a love you didn't even realize was holding you. That invisible strength didn't protect you by wrapping you in armor or building high walls around your life. It protected you in a more mysterious way, by engraving luminous memory into your soul at the moments you were most fractured. Each time your world split apart, something deep inside you echoed, reminding you the break wasn't your end. It was a threshold. The hollow you felt was not there to erase you. It was asking to empty you of everything no longer meant to stay. The loneliness you mistook for punishment was not abandonment. It was an invitation, a call back inward, a call to return to yourself. That whisper, the one that arrived when every other voice had fallen silent, was what kept you whole. You recognize it now in how gentle you are with others, in the way you sit patiently beside someone who is unraveling, in the softness of your gaze. When you meet a wound that has no words, you don't judge, because you know no one falls apart on purpose. You know this because you held yourself together when no one around you could understand the storm that was tearing through you. But still, you didn't become what wounded you. You didn't return the darkness that once pierced your chest. That kind of resilience wasn't built through force or grit. It was the fruit of being accompanied by something unseen that simply refused to let pain define you. You've learned that real protection doesn't mean feeling nothing. It means being able to feel everything without drowning in it. That is your defining strength, not the timeline of events you survived, but the qualities you chose to keep alive afterward. Your tenderness, your empathy, your sensitivity, your truth. these remained unbroken, not because the world was gentle with you, but because something greater sheltered them when nothing else could. The times you rose again, they weren't powered by logic. They were carried by something deeper, a gesture you didn't ask for, a sentence you overheard, a hand reaching toward you when you'd already given up. And none of it, not one part, was random. It was the mark of protection, a love that moved without permission, quietly carrying you forward, even on the days when meaning felt lost. You look back now and realize what kept you alive was not a thought. It was a heartbeat steady beneath the rubble, a larger life inside your life, staying awake while you wandered. And it is this rhythm that still moves you now. It's why you continue to long for depth, for truth, for meaning. It's why, even after everything, you refuse to live on the surface. Souls that have been touched by something holy cannot stay false for long. Their very energy demands integrity, even if you've gone quiet, even if you've doubted, even if you've lost your way. You have always returned to that place inside you where things still feel real. Your protection was never theatrical, but it was constant. And now it lives in the way you walk steadier with less need to explain. Because something in you knows you're not walking alone. You've tasted what it means to be accompanied in silence, and you've come to trust that there is a greater intelligence moving beneath what the mind can map. And perhaps that is the clearest sign of all. You keep going, not because you've never fallen, but because something in you refused to surrender. And that refusal was supported by something vast and unnamed. It didn't come to remove the sorrow. It came to remind you that even in sorrow, you can still protect your soul. You can still keep your softness. You can still stay true. And if even one word in this message mirrored something inside you, some part you hadn't been able to say aloud, then let your voice be heard. Have you met a soul whose presence felt like home? Or are you still walking the sacred path back to yourself? Wherever you are, your story, unfinished as it may be, might become the lantern someone else has been waiting for, the sign they didn't know they were looking for. And if there's someone near you who is silently carrying the false belief that love must wound, that peace must be earned, or that their worth comes through suffering, share this message with them. Let them remember, real love doesn't demand we shrink. True connection never asks for self-abandonment. And the most vital relationship we'll ever build is the one we form with our own inner truth. Before you go, I invite you to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Here, we journey into the inner architecture of the psyche beneath the surface of things. We follow the voice of the unconscious and the sacred reflections found in every human bond. If there's a question, a theme, a wound you want us to explore, leave it in the comments. This space breathes because of you. Your voice isn't just welcome, it's essential. Thank you for showing up. Not just for this video, but for your own unfolding. For the sacred labor of remembering who you truly are. And always remember this. When the right person appears, your soul will know. Not through fear, but through peace. Until that moment comes, let your most intimate relationship be the one you nurture within. That is your foundation. That is your home. And from that wholeness, everything real begins. Until next time, I'll see you on the path.